If you're a high performer looking to grow and make an impact, but feeling stuck, underappreciated, and burned out at work, you're in the right place. I'm Melissa Vining, and this is the Job Search for High Performing Misfits podcast. I help high performers leave draining jobs behind, reclaim their careers, and land roles in organizations where they can thrive. Tune in for tips, insights, and inspiration for your journey to fulfilling work that fits you. Welcome back to Job Search for High Performing Misfits. Today I'm here to talk about everyone's favorite hot topic, which is AI in the job search. So there is so much fear from job seekers right now around how employers are using AI in hiring. And I am not here today to take a deep dive into that because, for one thing, that's an entire episode on its own. And secondly, that is not my area of expertise. I am not a recruiter. And I believe that the only way to get reliable information about this is straight from recruiters because they are the ones actually using the technology on a daily basis. Unfortunately, there is a lot of misinformation out there about applicant tracking systems and AI in hiring. So I do want to give you this warning up front. If you are finding your information from technology companies who are selling this technology, or career coaches who are selling services to help you get past the ATS or game the system, but they have never actually used the technology themselves. Or if you are getting the information from other job seekers on the internet who may have heard that this is what's happening in hiring and they are just as frustrated and burned out as everyone else, those are not reputable sources. Another thing that you have to understand is that there's a difference between what technology features are available right now and how it's actually being adopted by hiring professionals. And of course, this is going to vary from employer to employer and recruiter to recruiter. So we cannot say this is how everyone is using or is not using certain technologies in AI or in applicant tracking systems. So overall, from what I've heard from recruiters, AI has the ability to source for candidates, to screen resumes, and to interview candidates. Are most people actually using it for those purposes? No, because they're finding that it's not effective or it's just not really working for them. And of course, that's right now. This is all rapidly evolving and that could change in the future. But right now, from what I'm hearing from recruiters, they're not using it for that. In practice, what they're actually using it for are things like writing job descriptions, which is unfortunate because then we tend to see these job descriptions that are very vague and generic and don't actually tell us very much about the job or what's really important in that job. We're also seeing them use it for things like transcribing and summarizing screening calls. This is, of course, something that everyone is using AI for at this point. It has become so helpful in that way because we don't have to sit there and take notes during calls. We can actually just rely on this assistant to do it for us, and it will capture everything we need and summarize it. So they are definitely using it for that. They are also using it to help them come up with interview questions and to write emails. So like I mentioned, right now, it is May of 2026, and this is likely to continue to change and shift over time. But right now, this is really the reality that we're seeing overall. I am going to give you some links to recruiters that I love that you can follow on LinkedIn who are giving really factual, helpful information about applicant tracking systems and AI use in hiring. So I highly recommend checking them out. I will put the links in the show notes so you'll have access to those. But today, the real topic that I actually wanted to talk about was how you are hurting your own job search by using AI in the wrong ways. So the latest data I saw on this was from a Greenhouse survey of 1,200 job seekers in the United States. And it found that 74% of those surveyed said that they use AI in their job search. Now, of course, it did not tell us how these people were using AI. And obviously, there are many different ways that it can be used in the job search. So I'm going to get into more of that soon. But before I do, I also wanted to mention that they asked them why are they using AI as part of their job search strategy. 37% of those who use it said they are using it because they think all the other job seekers are using it. So they also feel like they need to use it in order to stay competitive. 47% of those who use it said that they are using it because they think the employers are using it. So they feel like they need to use it in order to level the playing field with the employers. So based on my own experience with job seekers that I see every day, most people are using this to write their application materials. And that is not an effective use of AI. So I'm not here to tell you that you should never use it, but the way that you are probably using it is probably doing more harm than good. And I don't want that to happen. So that is why I feel like it's important to actually say this and to actually talk about what is an effective use of AI and what is really actually harming you instead of helping you. So the reality of the job search right now and of the hiring climate is that we are seeing way more applications per job. AI has made it faster and more efficient to submit more applications, so people are. AI has also homogenized applications. So before, when it was easy to tell the difference between a qualified candidate, now everything essentially looks the same, and it's all basically substandard. So employers can no longer just rely on application materials alone to evaluate candidates because the materials are really not telling them anything, and they're not differentiating people. So I see this all the time in resumes, cover letters, and on LinkedIn. So for example, some of the language that I tend to see would be something along the lines of collaborative, results-driven professional who thrives in environments with complex technical and change management components. Adept at relationship building, communication, and stakeholder management, with demonstrated ability to think analytically while remaining focused on the broader organizational goals. This says nothing. Even while I was reading it, my brain turned off because it is that vague and that boring, and it doesn't capture your attention at all because I have no idea when I'm reading this who this person is, what they do, and why I should care. So if we transform this into something that's actually useful for an application material, it might say something like project manager with 10 plus years experience leading process improvement initiatives and enterprise technology implementation in the healthcare industry. Right there with the first sentence, we know who this person is. They're a project manager. They have 10 years of experience with these specific things, and they do this within the healthcare industry. So the next part of this could be something like managed cross-functional projects for high-growth startups and Fortune 500 companies, driving revenue growth by up to 26% and maintaining 95% client satisfaction. So now in these two sentences, we know who they are, what they do, who they do it for, right? They do this in healthcare and specifically for both high growth startups and Fortune 500 companies. So we have this wide range of types of spaces that they can be successful in. They're mentioning those employer characteristics so we can identify they have done this in the past for organizations like mine. If I'm a hiring person and I'm looking for someone who fits with me, I'm looking for that specific information. Not only that, but we understand how this person can actually contribute. We have specific impact and metrics that say they have driven revenue growth by up to 26% and their clients are happy. It's a 95% client satisfaction rate. So just in those two sentences, it says everything we need to know to actually continue reading. So the problem is not inherently the fact that AI was used. It's about the quality of the output. So the biggest mistake that people are really making here is believing that AI can do this better than they can, because it can't. So there are a couple reasons why this happens. First is that AI loves to list stuff. It knows that certain things are important, but it doesn't know how to communicate it in a way that makes sense. So it ends up just putting it into these sentences that say something like, I want to leverage my strengths in relationship building, creativity, and change management to support your organization. Okay, you've just listed some things that seem like they might be important, but there's no context and it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's just a list in a paragraph. And that's what I see over and over with AI-generated content. Another thing that it does is it uses fluffy words that feel artificially inflated, and basically they're distracting from the main point. So it's going to say things like revolutionary, massive, deeply, all of these things that just make it feel fake and inauthentic and take your focus away from the things that actually matter. It's also going to be way too generic. And this is going to happen every time because it is AI and it is inherently generating generic content. It is not meant to know you and your stories. It is meant to do this in scale, right? So it might say something like spearheaded cutting edge initiatives. Again, that could mean anything. So it is taking out the important pieces of this and creating this thing that anyone could copy and paste. And that's why employers are seeing these materials that look the same from candidate to candidate. So it does not know your stories. And as AI continues to rise in use, your human stories will actually become more and more important because that will be what sets you apart. So there are some ways that you can use AI that will actually help you in your job search. So the first one is that you can gather information to help you define your goals. If you have heard me talk about the job search on other podcast episodes or anywhere else, you have heard me talk about the importance of being specific and targeted as a foundation in your job search. So you need to know what job titles you are looking for. You need to know what companies you are looking for. You need to be able to describe those companies and to actually list out target companies that you're interested in working for. This is a much more proactive way of job searching versus just going on the job boards and hoping that whatever you find fits and just reacting to what you see. So this is actually going to be a way that AI can come into play in a helpful context. So you can use it to gather information that will help you actually define your goals. So you can tell it what you love to do at work and ask for job titles that align. This is especially helpful if you're not quite sure what you want to do next, or you kind of know that these are the things you like to do, but you don't know what kinds of jobs that translates into. So this can give you a starting place for you to start thinking, okay, I might be able to do this type of job. Now I'm going to go do my research on it as well. I'm not just only going to take AI's word for it and go out and apply for those jobs, but I'm going to go look into what does it look like on a day-to-day basis to actually do this job. Maybe I'm going to go talk to people who have done it, especially if it's a job that I haven't done before or I might not be as familiar with. You can also use it for the target employers list. So you can describe your priorities for your next role in your next workplace, and then ask it to list out some employers that might align with that. So for example, if you are specifically looking for remote work, you might be asking, okay, I know that I have these job titles that are along the lines of what I'm looking to do. What kinds of employers hire for those jobs in a remote capacity? You might have other characteristics that are important as well. So maybe you're looking in a specific industry. Maybe you're looking to work at a small company or a large company. Maybe there's, something else that's important to you that you can actually define and tell AI, this is what's important to me. What employers seem to have those things? So this is going to help you gather that information, put together your lists, and really be specific in the rest of your job search. Once you have that information, it can also help you understand your target employers. So this is one of the big things that AI can actually do to help level the playing field for job seekers, because before it would be harder to research and to maybe understand what's important for these target employers. But now you can have your list and you can ask AI, what do these employers care about most? What are their challenges? What are their business goals? How do they specifically measure success? Especially if you are in a position where you're just doing day-to-day work and you're kind of removed from those high-level business goals, it can be hard to understand or to relate what you do to the impact that the employers care about. So by understanding these pieces of it, you can actually use that as a foundation to build better materials. So once you have all of that information, you're going to go think to yourself, okay, what example do I have that shows that I can meet those specific goals that I just researched for my target employers? You have to write this story yourself. You cannot tell AI to write this for you because it's going to come up with all of those issues that I talked about earlier. You have to actually take it and say, okay, the employer measures success based on fewer job-related incidents and injuries among their staff. So you can actually say, okay, when I was working in this role, I was able to manage some of this risk by putting together these processes to help the staff stay safer in their day-to-day work. Great. We have that story and we can actually describe it in a way that anyone can understand. Anyone should be able to look at that bullet point and understand what you did and why it was important. This means you cannot be using a bunch of jargon. You cannot be using those filler words that AI loves to use. It has to be something where you could hand it to a friend who might work in a different industry and not be familiar with your work. And they should be able to say, I understand what it is that you do, and I understand why it was important. This is so important because the recruiters that might be reading your resume may not have the full understanding of the specific jargon or terminology that you might use on a day-to-day basis. And not only that, but it makes it less readable overall. So even if you're giving it to a hiring manager who does understand that terminology, it usually makes it harder for them to read and understand, and we want them to immediately be able to read it and say, this person provides value in this specific way, this is what they can do, and this is how they can help me. So once you have your story written down, you can give it to AI and ask for suggestions on how to make it more concise. This is really helpful because a lot of the times when you're writing, and I know this is true for me, I can get really caught up in trying to make it perfect, and it makes the whole process so much slower and harder. So now that AI is in the picture, it makes it a little bit easier for me to get started because I can tell myself, I'm going to write this story in my own words and it's not going to be perfect. And that's the expectation, right? It's going to be a draft. It's not going to be perfect. And I'm going to revise it from there. So I write my draft and then I'm going to give it to AI and ask for those suggestions on how to make it more concise. You have to be careful with this because it will often introduce that fluffy, generic AI language, or it'll try to turn it into a list, right? It will sometimes use words or descriptions that might sound impressive, but don't actually make sense in your role or your industry. So this is where you have to make sure that you're aligning the terminology enough without using a lot of jargon or acronyms or things like that, but so that someone in your industry can look at it and they don't have to translate, like, why is this person using this terminology that we don't use? Another thing that AI might do here that you have to be careful of is that it might make things up or it might make associations that are not accurate. One of the things that employers are really worried about is the accuracy of what they're reading. So they are seeing more and more that because people are just using AI to generate their materials and they're not necessarily going back and fact checking and editing, some of the things that they're getting are actually false. And so you have to be really careful to make sure that it didn't make anything up and it didn't assume something that changes the meaning of what you're trying to say. Another thing that it will do is that it will combine sentences that should not be combined because contextually they don't make sense together. So I was using AI for a project I was working on, and the sentences that I was trying to say went in a specific order because that's how the story went, right? So I wanted to say A first, I wanted to say B second, I wanted to say C last, and it combined, for example, A and C. And it made it sound like they went together, but actually they don't. And that introduces confusion into the story. So you have to be really careful that those things are not happening. So you might be able to take pieces of what it writes or use it as inspiration, but almost never can you copy and paste. You cannot outsource the thinking to AI. And this is where everyone is going wrong because they're thinking this is easier. I'm just going to have AI do it for me. And the human element and the human analysis and the understanding and the communication of it is failing. And the same is true of your cover letter and your LinkedIn profile because the main point is to tell your story. It's to communicate something to the employer, something important that they can't see in your resume, and it has to come from you. It is a serious missed opportunity to let AI write your cover letter and LinkedIn content because the thing that will actually make you stand out in a market where up to 74% of the application materials might be AI generated is your human story. The number one concern employers have right now is not whether or not you know how to use ChatGPT. It's authenticity. They're worried about being able to distinguish between real qualified candidates and those that are fake or misrepresented. So to wrap this up, we have to really flip the narrative here because we can get caught in all of this negativity around AI in the hiring process and how employers might be using it and how unfair it might be. But instead of looking at this as a game that you can't win, look at it as a hidden opportunity. Because if you take the time to really focus your job search to understand your target audience, the types of roles that you're looking for, the types of employers that you're looking for, who they are and what they care about, and then to write a resume that actually explains who you are, what you do, and how you contribute. And not only that, but to really make your supporting materials and strategies human, you are immediately going to be in the top 10% of job seekers because the bar for human connection has never been lower. You are giving the employer what they need, and you're doing it in a way that makes them feel like they can trust you. In the end, your human story is going to be your ultimate competitive advantage. If you love this podcast, be sure to hit subscribe, leave me a review, and share it with a friend so we can help more high-performing misfits find work they love. See you next time.